Watching him go didn't change anything. It was simply a compulsion, a silent goodbye. "I was thinking of making some pancakes," she called back impulsively. "You should come over. We'll have breakfast before you open." Suzanne tilted her head, looking pleased by the suggestion. "Yum! Be down at 5. Meg was about to turn and head inside the inn, empty of patrons this early in the season, when she heard a familiar voice. "Is this pancake soiree a private party, or can anyone join?" She leaned forward past the wooden porch railing to see Dahlia Delaney pedaling her lavender bicycle up the street. The older woman owned a quaint lakeside cafe named after herself, which sat almost directly across the street from the flower shop. And she also happened to be Zack's aunt, the person who had introduced them 5 years ago. Dahlia was a woman of her own, one who'd perfected the fine art of being both pragmatic and flamboyant at the same time, and Meg never minded spending time with her. "I think we can squeeze a third plate on the table," she informed Dahlia, this smile coming easier. A pleasant morning with friends would distract her from Zack's departure, at least for a little while. And as she walked in the door, her heart lifted at simply knowing her kitchen and sunroom would soon be filled with laughter. The inn had been her home since the age of 24, and it had been her beloved grandmother's home before that. It got quiet during the long winters. Quieter still, it seemed, when Zack took to the water, even though she knew it wasn't really any quieter than before he'd arrived in her life. She just noticed it more now, and maybe she was happy to postpone that quiet a bit longer. But this is what you signed up for. She'd taken over the inn after her grandma's unexpected death in her early 60s, and at a dark moment in her own life when isolation had seemed safe and easier than other alternatives. And though it wasn't the life she'd planned, she'd never regretted the decision, even if it meant a very particular, secluded sort of existence. But soon, the ferry would begin bringing tourists for the season, and the streets would bustle with bike and foot traffic, and the house would be filled with guests, old and new. The lilacs and honeysuckle would burst into fragrant bloom, their sweet scents competing with the aroma of fresh corn on the cob and hamburgers from the grill on the back patio. Trevor Bateman would be back at the Pink Pelican playing his guitar for tips on the little stage above the bar, and Cooper Cross would begin making his daily morning runs past the inn. Mr. Hankins would bring his fresh produce over from the mainland on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, selling it at the little wooden stand near the bicycle livery. Now empty flower boxes would overflow with color, and Adirondack chairs would be filled with people escaping their busy city lives somewhere far away. Summer brought life of so many kinds back to the island, and if she needed a little more life, summer would bring it back to her as well. Just past noon, Meg stood on a small ladder, attempting to unscrew a peeling white shutter from the front of the sunny yellow inn and trying not to be angry. She shouldn't have waited so late in the season to paint, but she couldn't put it off any longer. And in fairness to Zack, she'd only mentioned wanting to start the project once a few weeks ago, in passing, so he had no way of knowing she'd been counting on his help. Nor had she told him about the steak. She'd bought 2 New York strips at Coaster's Market a week ago to surprise him with a special dinner to celebrate their 5-year anniversary. Anniversary of what? They weren't in a committed relationship. They were undefined. When his fishing boat was docked here, he lived in the apartment above Dahlia's, and he spent a lot of nights in Meg's bed. Though everyone on the island thought of them as a couple. Are Meg and Zack coming? I saw Meg and Zack at the Pink Pelican. Meg and Zack put in a gorgeous new fire pit on her patio. And he'd been there for her when Aunt Julia had gotten sick, and sicker, and then died. He'd been her rock in those days. Maybe that was when they become Meg and Zack. So many times during Aunt Julia's illness just over 2 years ago, she'd wanted to crumble, but he hadn't let her. "You get through this, Maggie May," he would say. He'd long called her that, at first teasingly, from the old Rod Stewart song, but then it had become habit. "You'll get through this because you don't have a choice. That's how these things work. But I'm here. And you don't have to be strong when it's just you and me, honey." And he'd squeeze her hand and hold her tight and let her cry until